Good day, people. You are watching EA Lego Academy. My name is Eliazar, and welcome to another episode of my Python programming series. Now, today, we are done with our data structures and all the things that has to do with um, variables being assigned multiple values. So we talked about that explicitly. If you can remember, we have looked at lists, we've looked at tuples, we've looked at dictionaries. So now we want to turn our attention to user input and while loops. So we are going to start with user input. So user input is when we assign a value to a variable after a program has been run. So you only give a value to a variable after you have run or executed that program. So it's just as the name implies. So it's not like we create a variable and then we assign it a value based on its data type, be it a string or an integer or a data structure like a tuple, list, or dictionary. So it's not like that. We have to execute the program first before we can assign a value to that variable. Now, the user input, this definition allows us to make use of a function called the input function. So that function works similar to the print function in the sense that you can decide to write something within the quotation mark, within a string quotation, and it will be displayed on your screen. But as it is displayed, it will be prompting you to type in something that will now act or would now act as a value of the variable you created, which you assigned the input function. So it's going to make a lot of sense when we start writing code. But what we are trying to say is that there is a function called input that allows us to assign a value to a variable only after a program has been run. So that is what we're talking about. Now let's look at the while loops. So now the reason why I define all these terms down before we start writing code is so that you can have an idea of what we are trying to talk about. I can't just jump straight into writing code. You might be lost. So while loops. So these are loops that repeatedly execute a program until a condition is false. So they allow us to run a program over and over again until a condition is false, or they allow us to execute a program when a condition is satisfied. So I will be explaining the differences between these two definitions I just gave. So the appropriate definition would be that these are loops that repeatedly execute a program until a condition is false or has been satisfied. Satisfied. So this is the appropriate definition, and you will be seeing it in action. But I'll try to explain it to see if you will be able to get what I'm saying. So in the case of executing a program until the condition is false, I can decide to create a while loop and attach a condition to that loop. Now, that loop will keep on running over and over again until that condition I attach to it becomes false. That is when this definition holds, the first definition. Now, the second definition is if I create a while loop and beside the while loop, I write a true value, the true value, not the false, the true, true. Now we know that while loop will run over and over again continuously until I decide to type a condition for it, until I type a condition that will need to be satisfied before that while loop can stop. So you can see the difference is that the definition still concerns the while loop, but It depends on how you manipulate your code. So we're going to be doing that, and you are going to be seeing explicitly what I'm trying to explain here. So let's look at writing clear prompts. So we said that this is when we run a program using user input. So I said the user input works just like the print function in the sense that it allows you to display something to the screen, but at the same time, it is expecting you to type a value which will then be assigned to the variable you created that was assigned the input function. This is just it in practice. You can see that here I assigned the input function to this variable, but at the same time, when I execute this program, this input function will display enter your name on my screen. Now, as soon as I type in a value, the input function will take that value and make it the value of this variable name. That's what I'm trying to say in a nutshell. Now, until you type that value and until the input function makes that value the value of this variable, you would not be able to see this result. So it's only when you do that, that is when you will now see the value that was assigned to name being used to make this sentence. But of course, we are not going to copy this code. We are going to type it ourselves. So I just did that. The reason why I copied code in my previous video was because I was trying to work with time. All right, so let's start. So you come here, right click, come to new and type Python file. So, or rather click Python file. Then you type user input, user underscore input. Wow, just a user input loop. Yeah, let's not make the name too long. So I can create a variable. I'll just make it 2. I'll say inputs. Let me increase the screen so that you can see what I'm doing. So input, then you come here and say enter name. Now it's waiting for you to, when I print out this program, you will see that it will be waiting for you to enter a value for name. So you see to type, it will show enter name on your screen. I can create another, okay, let me just hold on for now. I won't do that. I will need to explain the concept. So you say input, then enter course of study. Now you come here and make a sentence to make a sentence with whatever value was supplied to these two variables. So you can say hello is star or hello there, or is your format. So the full stop, you hello there, you study. Now you can come here and say dot format, and you supply the variable names, say name and the course. So whatever value you assign to name and course is what Python is going to use to replace this curly brackets. So I will just extend the result pane so that we can see it properly. Click on play. So you see I get a prompt enter name. So now you can see that this input function acts just the same way your print function works. So I will type a name, maybe Alex, and I press enter. Then it proceeds to the next input, which says enter course of study. So I can enter the course of study, chemistry. And when I press enter, it will make a sentence with Alex and chemistry. This sentence here that we have, it will print out, hello there, Alex, you study chemistry. I'm sure we get the picture by now. So that is what I was trying to define to you. So now let's look at using int to accept numerical inputs. So this is when we use the int function to convert the value we assign to a variable after a program has been run into an integer. So when you get the input function prompting you to enter a value to a name, you can decide to restrict that value to be of the integer format alone. And also you can use the float function as well to restrict that value to be of the float format also. So I can just minimize. I don't want to reduce it so that we can use it in our subsequent examples. All right, so this one was writing clear prompts. We want to write the topic, so writing clear prompts. And the next one is, what's the next title? Using int to accept numerical inputs. So using int, that is using the int function to accept numerical inputs. All right, so I can come here and say name is equal to, so I won't just do that. I will just go straight to the point, age, then inputs, then enter your age. So it will print this out to the screen. Then whatever value you enter, it will use it to make a sentence. So I can see that you are you are of age. So you can use your C style string. So I will use percentage %d, that of course represents numerical values. If you can't remember, do well to go back to my previous tutorials. So where I taught my very first tutorial, variables and simple data types. So I talked about this, how you can, make sentences with values assigned to variables. So this will print out, I can see that you are of age, then whichever value you type, it would use that of age. Yes. So click on play and enter age. I will just say 29, and to say I can see that you are of age 29 years. I'm not sure that's a very good English, but that's what we get. It makes a sentence with the value we supplied. You can comment that out. Let's proceed. So moving on to the next. So you can see that here, this example, I used two values. I supplied a name and an age. You can decide to write as many values as you want using the input function. It's your choice. So let's look at the modulo operator. Although this operator was treated in my earlier episodes when I talked about variables and simple data types. So we looked at the different operators that we can use for mathematical operations. So I treated that there, but I will repeat it here because we would have need for it in this tutorial, in this episode. So the modulo operator is used to get the remainder after we divide a number by another number. So now this does not print out the result after you divide two numbers together. However, it prints out what remains after you have carried out the division of two numbers. So here I divided 17 by 9. So 9 can go into 17 once, remainder 8. You just highlight it, copy it, and then paste, and then you get your results. So I only did this so that we can see how we can use it later on. That's why I'm repeating it again. Okay, so now the next thing is while loops. So the almighty while loops we have been talking about. So let's see how you can use them. So something to note here before we continue, a while loop can do everything that a for loop can do and more. So it can do more things than a for loop, but it can do exactly the same thing that a for loop can do. Of course, with a little manipulation here and there, which I will be treating in my algorithms series. So I'm not teaching it in my Python series. I have another series I'm trying to create about algorithms, how to solve complex problems or everyday real life problems also artificial intelligence problems, machine learning, how you can apply them to business solutions. So I'll be doing that there, not here. So we said these are loops that repeatedly execute a program until a condition is false. We can see this displayed below. So now, if you can remember the definition of the while loop, we'll just go back there. I said these are loops that repeatedly execute a program until a condition is false. So this is where this definition applies to the program we are about to write. Now, this program would run repeatedly until this condition here becomes false. It's going to run repeatedly until the condition becomes false. So now here you can see that I created a variable called num and gave it a value of 1. I am now trying to check if the value that was assigned to that variable, if it's less than or equal to 10. Applying your knowledge of the truth table, if you can still remember when we looked at conditional statements, I said that for the fact that we are comparing two values using the OR logical operator, if one of those values is true and the other value is false, the condition will still be true, irrespective of if a value is false, provided we have one true value there. So here we can see that the value of this variable num is equal to 1 and 1 is less than 10 but not equal to 10. So there's an OR logical operator here that allows us to check, and specify if that value of this variable is less than or equal to 10. So for the first iteration, num was assigned the value of 1. So 1 is less than 10 but not equal to 10. So this will print out 1 and this will increment 1 by 1. So an increment just simply means to increase a value by a particular amount. That's what we mean by incrementing a value, trying to increase it by a particular amount. So now you will discover that this will add 1 to 1, making it 2, and then it will start the while loop a second time. Now, on the second iteration, num is now 2. 2 is still less than 10, so it will print out 2. Increment 2 by 1, making it 3. It will check again. 3 is still less than 10, but not equal to 10. But because one condition is true, when we are using the OR logical operator, it will print out 3. Increment 3 by 1, making it 4. Start again. So it keeps doing that. Now, when it gets to 10, at that point in time, num is equal to 10. So now we will discover that it is the other part of the logical operator that is true and the first part is false. So at the time when num is equal to 10, we will discover that num is equal to 10, but 10 is not less than 10. So the condition is still true at that point. So it will print out 10 and increment it by 1, making it 11. It is now at this time or at this point that the while loop will not start again, hence satisfying this definition that was stated earlier. So we're going to see how we can satisfy this second definition. So let's write our own program by ourselves. I'm not copying this code. I'm going to type it with my hand. You can come here and you can create a variable. So this time around, let's try and print out value that starts from 1 to 100. So you come here and say while num is less than or equal to 100. You just come here, say print num, and then you can come here and say num is equal to num plus 1. Now, some programming books, they do something like this. They just say num plus equal to 1. So now this concept you are seeing here is the same as this concept as well. They can be used interchangeably. They can be used interchangeably. Just come here, press play. You get it printed out in a stacked order. You will discover that we have from 1 down to 100. So when it gets to 100 and it increments it to 101, your while loop still does not start again because by that time the condition is now false. Hope that makes sense. All right, so we'll be writing more complex programs with time, so just get ready. So let's look at another program that says letting the user choose when to quit. So we said this is a program. A This is a program that runs continuously until the user chooses to stop the program by typing stop. So now this program only stops when the user types stop. Let us examine it properly. So I think there was a time, if you can remember, well, okay, I'm not sure I've gotten there yet. We haven't gotten there yet. So I'm not going to stress. But there are some conventions we should know in Python, programming. So the convention is this: if I create a variable called name and I assign it a value, a string value, and I write Alex, Python sees it as a true value, provided a string value has something within the quotation mark. Python sees it as a true value. But if I open up an empty quote, Python sees it as a value, yes, but at the same time, Python sees it as a false value. Why? Because I did not write anything within the quotes. Now, also, if I have another variable and I assign it a list, data structure having some elements in it, Python sees this as a true value. And if I create another list data structure and assign it an empty square bracket, or sorry, if I create another variable and I assign it an empty list data structure, Python sees it as a false value. So these are some conventions that we should know when we are creating conditional statements in Python. Now, I created a variable, I assigned it an empty string. Of course, it's a false value from what we just said. And Python needs to know that this variable has actually been initialized a value. So when we say initialize, we simply mean assigning a temporary value to a variable. That's what it means. So here I'm checking that now this while loop is going to run as long as the value you have assigned to name is not equal to stop. If you can remember when we looked at comparison operators, where we looked at less than, greater than, equal to, not equal to, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. If you can still remember, I said when we have the exclamation mark equal to is the same thing as saying not equal to. That's what it means. So not equal to. That's what it is. So we are saying that this while loop is going to run as long as this condition is true. And we can see that the initial value of name is not equal to stop. So the while loop will run. Now when the while loop runs, it will print out this sentence that says enter name, waiting for you to assign a value to name. Of course, we know how the input function works. We just talked about that. So it would print this out to you saying enter name. Now, whichever value you enter is going to assign it as the value of name and make a sentence with that value. So if I give it Alex here, just as an example, it will print out greetings Alex and it will start again a second time. Now the reason why the while loop will start a second time is because the name I assigned to name here was not still equal to stop. It was Alex and Alex is not equal to stop. So it's going to start again, still satisfying the condition, because after you enter Alex, that value you assign to name is going to continue the loop from where it left off. So starting the iteration a second time, name is now Alex and Alex is not equal to stop. It will start the loop a second time asking you to enter name. So if you still enter a value that is still not stop, it will make a sentence with that value and still start again a third time. So your while loop will continuously run until this condition becomes false. And the only way this condition can become false is if you assign a value to name that is stop, written exactly like this with a capital letter S. So when you assign stop to name, that is only when this program will stop. But before this program stops, it's going to print out greetings stop and then it will not start again. So let's see how we can do something by ourselves. So I'll create a variable called name, assign it a value of Lucas. Now it is not a must that this string must be empty, provided the value is not equal to that value that you are trying to create as a condition. So I will come here and say while name is not equal to stop, you can do something like this, and you can come here and even expand and make it a bit more complex and say or name is not equal to stop. Now if you are conversant with the truth table, again you will understand this conditional statement I created. So I'm saying that as long as I'm not typing capital letter or small letter for stop, this while loop would continuously run. And we know that when we look at the or logical operator, let's take for example, if I'm typing stop with the capital letter S for name and I'm not typing with the small letter, we can see that here at this point, this condition will be true and this condition will be false. But because we have the or logical operator comparing a true and a false value together, this entire condition is true. I hope that makes sense. Come here, you say input, and you can come here and say enter your name. And you come here and make a sentence with that name. You can say hello there, Mr. And you come here to format. Then you can just pass the name there. So if you run this code, you discover what you will get. So enter name, I come and say Alex, hello there Mr. Alex, then it starts again. Lucas, hello there Mr. Lucas. And when I type stop, it breaks out. It says hello there Mr. Stop, and it's supposed to break out anyway. So there's a bug here. There's a bug in our program which we are going to address. So we're going to address this bug. All right. So now, sometimes your Python program does things like this for reasons I can't explain. So what we are going to do, you come here, create a condition, and you say name is, you say if name is equivalent to stop, or name is equivalent to stop, you want to say break. So I will introduce break later, but for now I want to use it here because the program is still running despite the fact that the condition has been satisfied. So let us try and do this again. Let's try and do this again. So I'll run the code again a second time and then we'll try to figure out what the error is. So I'll come here and I'll type Alex and it prints out hello there Mr. Alex. Now if I type stop, let's see if it stops. So you see it breaks out of the program. So now I really don't know why it didn't stop initially here because we satisfied this condition, or it could be that because one of them was still true, because this one was false and then it was not this, I could assume that that's the reason why it was still running. All right, so that's true. So because when I typed stop here at this point in time, this one now became true. Sorry, this one became false because we said as long as name is not equal to stop. So that was my mistake. So the reason why it did not stop was because this condition was now false, because at that point in time we're checking as long as name is not equal to stop, the program will run, right? And we said the or statement would allow us to execute a code if we have at least one true. So take note of that, at least one true. But you discover that even after I typed stop with the capital letter here in this code, you will discover that when I typed it with the capital letter, making this condition false, this one was still true because the one with the capital letter is not equal to the one with the small letter. So it means that the while loop will still be running, will still run rather. So I guess that explains that, but that doesn't even make enough. That does not even make enough sense because if we are saying that, then how about this? Why did this one work? So why did this one work? Anyway, I don't want to waste our time. We'll do that when we face more logical problems or when I'm treating my algorithm tutorial, we're going to address all this more intricately. But this is a friendly introduction to while loop, and I don't want us to get too in depth with logic and analysis. The point is that you are expected to just have an understanding of how the while loop works. We Initially, the value of name was Lucas. The condition was that as long as this name is not equal to stop, which it wasn't, it was equal to Lucas, so the while loop will run. Now, when you type a value, we have conditions that will check the value we are entering. If the value we are entering is not stop, if it's a different value, neither of these conditions would be met. They are both false. So, and when we have two conditions that are false being separated with the OR logical operator, Python would automatically execute what is inside the else. So it will make a sentence with this, hello there, whichever value you entered, and it will start the while loop a second time. So the while loop would keep on repeating over and over again until you type stop, then it breaks out, which will bring us to the break statement. I would explain that subsequently. All right, so since we are done with this, comment it out and let's proceed to the next. Now you can make your code a bit more fancy when it's about to break out of a while loop, which I will explain. Now you can also use the break statement on a for loop, which I will also be explaining in our algorithm tutorial. So let's look at using a flag. So this is when we create a variable and assign it the true and false Boolean values, using it to begin and stop a while loop. We can see this demonstrated below. Now, it's very simple. A flag is when you create a variable and then you give it two Boolean values, both true and false, but not at the same time. The time when we give it a true value is when we are trying to use it to start a while loop. And the time when we give it a false value is when we are trying to use it to stop that while loop. Now, you can see that the initial value of run was true. And I created a variable called name and I assigned it a value of Josh. I'm now checking if the value of run, like while run, you can see that it's the same thing as while true because the value of run is true. So this is the same thing as while true. Now, while true, of course, we know that when a condition is true, the program will start. So the condition is true and we get prompted enter name. So whatever value you assign to name, if it is not equal to stop, if it's not equal to either of these stop values, whether with the small letter or the capital letter, it's going to proceed to the else statement and execute a statement with whatever value you entered or you assigned to name using the input function. So it will print, so maybe I assigned Alex, it will print out hello there Alex and it will start the while loop again because the while loop is still true. I haven't changed the value to false yet because a condition has not yet been satisfied. So it will start again and it will prompt me to enter another value again for name like that. As long as the value is not stop, it keeps printing out the hello there statement to that value you assign name until you type stop for name. That's when it's going to change the value of run from true to false and break out of your while loop. So that's how it works. So let's look at that. So I will just come here and we're going to write the program ourselves. So I will create a variable called name, assign it a value of David. Come here, create a a so I'm going to create a flag and I'll call it true. And you come here and you say while run. So you can create a variable, assign it a value, say input, say enter name. So enter name, then you can create a condition that if name is not equal to, no, let's say if name is equivalent to stop, you can use the or if you like, let's use it to be consistent, or name is equal to stop with a small letter. So how we get, okay, so equivalent, you want to call that variable and assign it a value of false, your flag. Then you come here and say else to make a sentence with it. Say hey there, how are you? come here and say dot format, and you pass name. So this will make a sentence with name and start the while loop over and over again. So if I say um Richard, it's going to say, "Hey there, Richard, how are you?" When I type stop to break out of the while loop. So you can decide to make your while loop more fancy by coming here and saying print exiting program, so that it will know, like you will know when it's about to exit. It's just to add aesthetics to your code. So David, if I type stop exiting program and then it exits the program. All right, so let's proceed. So let's look at using break to exit a loop. So this is a Python statement and function that allows us to stop a loop. Of course, we know that statements are functions without a parenthesis. I've gone over this like 1,000 times. Okay, let me not exaggerate, but I've gone over it a couple of times now. I said statements are simply functions that don't have parentheses. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to copy this code. I'm not going to type any code again for now. Copy it and change. I'll show you what to do anyway. Copy it, comment this one out, paste. Now, the, the new thing I'm going to introduce here, what I'm going to introduce here that is new is that I'm going to comment this out. So the break statement does the same work as when you change the value of your flag to be false in order for it to stop your loop. So I will come here and say break. Now this break does the same work as this run equal to false. It gives us the ability to stop this while loop in its track. So you can click play and run your just run your program, enter name. So Quincy. Hey there, Quincy, how are you? And if you type stop, it does the exact same work as when you are using the flag. It does the same thing as when you are using the flag. So I'll just make it bigger, as big as the screen, so that we would see the entire result when we run our code. So let's look at the continue statement. So this is a Python statement that allows us to skip a particular iteration in a loop or a allows us to skip a particular iteration in a loop, comma, a block of code, a block of code, or a statement. So this is the proper definition. So it's not only used to skip a particular iteration, or rather, sorry, that's what it's used for. So I'm mistaking it for pass. So pass is another keyword that we use. So I will look at that. We will look at that rather later. My mistake. So let's not waste time. So this is a Python statement that allows us to skip a particular iteration in a loop. So it allows us to skip an iteration. Now, what are we doing here? Now I'm carrying out a while loop that allows me to start from number one. So my niche, I created a variable, I assigned it a value of 1, and I'm checking if the value of that variable is less than or equal to 10. Kind of like the same thing we did when we started the while loop. And within the while loop, I'm incrementing the value of 1 by 1, making it 2. So now this condition will now check, it will check if the value of norm, if it's equivalent to 5. So if it is not equivalent to 5, obviously we know that the condition is false. So Python will proceed to the else statement and execute, print out that 2 and start the while loop again. So now it is 2 and 2 is less than 10, but not equal to 10. So it will start again, add 1 to 2, making it 3. Check if 3 is equal to 5. Since 3 is not equal to 5, the condition is not false. It cannot proceed to the code. It will come here, print out 3. So it keeps doing that till it gets to 5. When it gets to 5, it's going to skip that iteration without executing it and return to start the loop again, incrementing it to 6 and printing it out till it gets to 10. Now, Take note, when it gets to 10 here, at that point in time, 10 is equivalent to 10, but not less than 10. So it will now increment 10 by 1, making 10 11. Then it comes down here and prints out 11. So you will discover that you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to skip 5 to print out 6 down to 11 and stop. That is what this while loop is going to do. So what you want to do, you want to comment this out, and so this one is using continue, the continue statement. So you can just give it a topic, a title rather, continue. So you can create the variable. I will assign it an initial value of 0. You can come here and say while num is less than or equal to, just say 15. I want to skip like two numbers, maybe 8 and 5. You come here, say num is equal to num plus 1. You can now come here and say if num is equivalent to 8. I want to skip 8 and 10. Continue. You also want to come here and say if num is equivalent to 10. Continue as well. But if not, come here and say print num. So that's what we're doing. So we're skipping 8 and 10. We're going to print out 1, 2. When it gets to 8, it will skip, and 10, or it will print out the other values. So you discover that we have 1, 2, 3. We skipped 8, we skipped 10, and we got to 15 and 16. So I'm sure you know why it's printing out 16. Although we said, let's see our code. We said less than or equal to 15. It's following the same logic as this. But if you want it to stop at 15 exactly, you can do it in two ways. By attaching another conditional statement just before the print when it gets to 15. You can come here and say if num is equivalent to 15, you want to break. Out. So you discover that you are now constraining it not to print out 15. This is the first way you can do it. Now the second way you can do it is by adjusting the condition. You can comment this out so that they will not clash. Comment it out. You can come here and remove this. Now you are ensuring that the value will be less than 15 or equal to 15, since you want it to do that for you. So doing this, it means that on the 14th iteration, when it's after it prints out 14, it's going to start again because 14 is still less than 15. When it starts again, it will now add 1 to 14, making it 15. Then you will see that it will stop at 15. So that is the way you can do it. The two different ways. Now you can see we stop there. So like I said, code is all about manipulation. How good is your manipulation? And it comes with experience and getting familiar with algorithms. So let's continue. So now the next one is avoiding infinite loops. I'm sure we must have already figured this out. So you can create a variable, or let's look at the definition. So we said this is when we create a condition that allows us to stop a loop. So you create a condition that allows you to stop a loop. You can do it manually, or you can decide to use your increment in order to stop it. So I'll show you the two different ways. So I'll create a variable called num and check and see while num is less than 10. So you want it to keep printing out till it gets to 10. But you can see that I did not increment it. Now this would print out 1 till infinity. The reason is because the condition checks if the value of num is actually less than 10, which is it's less than 10, so it will print out 1 and then it will start again and check if the value of num is less than 10. It is still less than 10, it will print out 1 like that and keeps checking and keeps printing out 1 like that, keeps checking if it is less than 10 till infinity. So we know that in order for us to nip that in the bud is to say plus 1 or whichever value you are trying to increment it by. So that's one way you can do it. So that's practically the only way you can do that because you want your value to keep changing and increasing. But one other way for you to make sure that even though you don't specify the condition here, you can create a while loop, and then in that while loop, you can give it true. Of course, we know that when we give true for a while loop, it's going to run infinitely till we supply a condition for it to stop. So that brings us to the second definition of the while loop that I talked about. I said we can see this. So I said, let's check it out. The first definition that we talked about. We said these are loops that repeatedly execute a program until a condition is false or has been satisfied. Now, if you look at the second definition for has been satisfied, we did that here. Now, you will discover that this while loop would keep on running over and over again until we satisfy this condition by supplying stop for name. So when we supply stop, that's when we're going to break out of the while loop. So this is only when the while loop stops, when we satisfy this condition. So this is the second definition of the while loop that I was talking about. So that's it. But for this one, we didn't run it, so you can see that it prints out 1 till infinity. If you run it, you'll discover that you just have 1 printed out over and over again. Yeah. So let's look at the next thing. All right, so now the next thing is using a while loop with lists and dictionaries. So this is when we use a while loop together with lists and dictionaries. So you can combine your use of a while loop with a list and a dictionary. So let's see how we can do that. All right, so let's look at the first one, moving items from one list to another. So this is when we combine the use of a while loop with the pop and append functions to move elements from one list to another. I'm coming just a second. I'll be back. Okay, almost done. All right. So this is when we combine the use of a while loop with the pop and append functions to move elements from one list to another. So you can combine the use of the pop and the append. Now, this is where we are going to apply the concept I explained to you. So I will just copy those code from when I explained those concepts down so that I won't have to type it again. So these concepts, don't worry, you get to type them yourself. Let me comment this out. So using while loop with lists and dictionaries. Using while loop, lists and dictionaries. All right. So we want to see how we can use while loops with lists and dictionaries. So let's look at moving items from one list to another. So I have a list and this list is empty. So before we even proceed, there was something I wanted to show. So paste. Sorry, something took my attention. So now, like I said, we have, when we create a variable and we assign it a string value, let me ensure that it's still recording. So when we create a variable and we assign it a value, Python sees that value as a true value. And when we create a variable and assign it a value of an empty string, it sees it as false. And when we create a variable and we assign it a list that has elements in it, we see it as true. and when we create a variable and assign it an empty list, we see it as false, or rather Python sees it as false. So having said all that, having understood the concept, let's head back to our code. Now I created a list that has 5 elements in it and another list which is empty. Now I'm trying to loop through this list that has elements. We said that when a list has elements in it, Python sees it as a true value. So now this is the same thing as while true, since the list has elements in it. So while true, of course, the loop will start. Now, when that loop starts, we are going to remove the element at the 0 index, which is 1, and assign that element to a variable called num. And then we are going to use the append function to add that element to this empty list for the first iteration. Now, after the first iteration, after we have removed 1 and added it to this list, we still have 4 elements left. The while loop is still true, and now 2 will now be at the 0 index. I'm going to repeat the whole process again, removing 2, assigning it to that same variable num, and appending it to this list. Now, after the first iteration, this list now had 1, and then after the second iteration, it now had 1 and 2. So this while loop would run continuously until it gets to 5 and until it removes 5. And after it removes 5 and adds it to this empty list, you will discover that my list hold will now be empty. And we said that when a list is empty, it is seen as false. Going back to the conventions that we stated, when a list is empty, it's seen as false. And then this while loop will not start again because the condition is now false. So let's see how we can do that in real time. So I can create a list called contain and then pass some letters. Or let me just use numbers. So 12, 27, 18, 19. You can come here and say while, for that, create another list, call it new con, go to an empty list. You come here and say while contain, say hold is equal to contain dot pop, and remove the element at the 0 index, assign it to that variable, say new con dot append hold. So after that, we will want to confirm if truly our list called contain no longer has any element, and we will also want to confirm if new con has all the elements that were once in our contain list. So you come here and say print contain, and then you come down here and say print new con. Now you will discover that the first print out sentence will give you an empty list, and the second one will give you a list that has elements. So you can see that we have successfully moved the elements from here to here. Yeah, pretty straightforward. So when you are done, you want to comment it out. Comment out. So comment out your code. Now let's look at removing all instances of specific values from a list. So this is when we use the while loop together with the remove statement to delete a particular element from a list. So if you can remember, when we looked at element in list and the result would be either true or false, we're going to apply that same concept here to see if an element is really inside the list, which will be the criteria for us to remove that element or not. So let's look at that. Now you can see that I have a list called list items, and it has some elements here, string elements to be precise. Cat, dog, rat, fox, rat. So now when the loop runs the first time, we will check if rat is inside list items. If rat is in list items, this will be the same thing as while true. So as long as the condition is true, the loop will run. Now, when the loop runs, we are going to use the remove function in our list data structure to remove rat from the list. So once it removes rat, we have two rats left. Now the while loop will start again because we have two rats left. So rat in list items, there's still rats. It will remove again, then start a third time. Rat is still there to remove. Now after the third time, it will not start again. Then we print out the remainder of the elements in that list. But because the while loop happens so fast, you don't get to see that iteration. But that's what happens at the back scenes. I'm explaining it to you. The while loop will have to run 3 times because why? We have 3 instances of rat inside that list. So you can just come here, create a list. I'll call it holder equal to Benz Ferrari Bugatti McLaren McLaren. I don't think that's the spelling. BMW. Let's repeat another car. So Bugatti. So I just come here and say while Bugatti in folder. So if it is there, I'm going to remove it. So you will come here and say holder dot remove and pass the element you want to remove from that list. So it's going to run based on the number of elements that you are trying to remove from that list. That's how many times this while loop will run. So you just come here and say holder, and you will discover that we are going to be left with Benz, Ferrari, and BMW. So you can minimize that. So just comment out your code when you are done. All right. So the next thing is filling a dictionary with user input and while loop. So now this topic is supposed to be under my algorithm series, but I will just treat it here. It's a bit complex, not gonna lie, but let's work with it. All right, so we said this is when we use a while loop together with the user input to add key value pairs to a dictionary. So you use the user input and the while loop together with the user input and while loop to add key value pairs. So if you can remember, I stated a way for us to add key value pairs to a dictionary. So here I just started with an empty dictionary. I created a flag, of course, I assigned it a true value. Now you can run this while loop without a flag. It's not a must. You must put a flag there. So I created a flag, and there will be an input. When you run this program, you get an input telling you enter key. Now, whichever value you enter is going to assign it as a value of this variable called key, and then you get prompted again to enter a value which will be assigned as a value of this variable called value. Now, I brought down the dictionary, the empty dictionary that was created, and I made that key variable and that value variable as key value pairs. So after the first iteration, when I got prompted to enter values for key and value, we are going to store that key and value as key value pairs inside this empty dictionary. And then it's going to proceed and ask you, do you want to repeat? You can see that this is my input function again, and this is what it will print out to your screen. Do you want to repeat? Now there's a condition that shows you, or that specifies the value that you are intended to enter for input. So that is the value you are intended to assign to repeat using the input function. So depending on the value is what would determine if our program will run a second time or not, or get executed a second time or not. So after you have entered value for key and value, it will store them as key value pairs in this dictionary, and you will get this prompt asking you, do you want to repeat? Now, if you type anything that is not no, whether you are typing Y, you are typing P, whichever letter, as long as that value you are typing is not no, no, it's going to start the while loop again, prompting you to enter new key value pairs again, storing them as key value pairs in the dictionary. But if you decide to type no, either with the small letter N or capital letter N, it's going to change that your flag that you gave a value of true to false, and it's going to break out of your while loop. Now you can decide to make this program more fancy by adding a sentence such as exiting program before it breaks out, like we did in our previous program. So what we are going to do, come here and you type that. So I'll create a dictionary. I'll just call it data, empty curly bracket. I will create a flag. I'll call it DISP equal to true. It doesn't matter. The name, rather, the variable name doesn't matter. Of course, the value matters. I'm talking about the variable name. So while DISP, now you just say key. It can be any variable name. I don't want us to use key so that we won't think that it must be key. So I will just call it first is equal to input. Enter your key. Then second, input. Enter your value. Now just come and say data, open a square bracket, first is equal to second. Now you can now come here and just say retry is equal to input. Do you want to enter new key value pairs? So you can just type no, no, stroke yes. So it doesn't matter. Now, even though you are typing, okay, let us create the condition first. You say if retry is equivalent to no, or retry is equivalent to no with the capital letter. You can even add another, or retry is equivalent to no. Doesn't really matter. Just let me just stop here. You now come here and say DISP equal to false. But if it is not, now everything can be inside a try and except. You can now come here and okay, all right, we would write this program again later. I was thinking of ways on how I can let this one execute under an else condition, but what we're trying to say is that this would prompt you to enter a key and value, storing them as key value pairs inside this dictionary, and then you will now get this sentence printed out on your screen saying, do you want to enter new key value pairs? Now, if you type anything that is not no, whether yes or y or n, it will proceed again asking you to enter new key value pairs. Now, if you now type no, it's going to break out of the while loop and you want to print out your dictionary that now has key value pairs. So if I should execute this program, hold on, let us modify it properly. I did not modify. So before we break, we want to print out a sentence that says exiting program. So exiting program. So just click on play and then enter key. I can just come here and say name and the value Alex. So do I want to repeat? If I come here and say yes, it repeats again. Enter another key, age 37. Do you want to repeat? Yes. The last key, course, physics. And do you want to repeat? No. And you see that exiting program, and then it shows you your dictionary with the key value pairs that you entered. All right, so that's all for today. So this brings us to the end of this tutorial series. Sorry, this tutorial episode rather. Now, if you have enjoyed the video so far, please like, and if you feel like it's going to be of an importance to a friend, a family member, or someone who you feel needs this video, please share. And if you want to encourage me to create more content like this, please subscribe. Now, if you had any problem with my method of teaching in this video, because I saw a lot of problems, I made some mistakes, I know. Some of my explanations were not succinct. But if you feel like it was okay, no problem. But if you feel you did not quite get me, please leave a message in the comment section. It will be much appreciated. All right, so till we meet again next time, have a very good